Thank you for coming this afternoon to our lecture. My name is Philip Phillips. I'm Associate Dean of the University Honors College. And Dean John Bevel and I welcome you here today for this special event, which is one of our contributions to the celebration of Black History Month on our campus. This lecture is our first Phi Kappa Phi lecture. Phi Kappa Phi, for those of you who don't know, is the most prestigious all-discipline honor society in the country, and it is one of the two major honor societies that we sponsor in the Honors College. And the motto of Phi Kappa Phi is Philosophia Criteto Photon, which means let the love of learning rule humanity. And to that end, we look for opportunities to support learning, scholarship, research. And today, we are sponsoring this lecture along with the University Honors College and the Virginia Peck Trust Fund of the English Department. So we were fortunate yesterday, some of you are in the Honors Lecture Series, we were fortunate yesterday to have our speaker with us. He talked about the process of writing his biography of Sutton E. Griggs. And our lecture series this semester is focused on life writing. It was a great lecture. We covered aspects of Griggs' life, but we also covered what it takes to study a life, especially when you know very little about it and when other people haven't written about it before. So our speaker is a trailblazer when it comes to the study of this very important figure whom I didn't know anything about really until I knew that he was doing research on him. And so one of the great things about having special lectures is that we offer people the opportunity to learn about something new and something important. So I'm very pleased and honored to welcome our speaker, Dr. John Gruesser. He is Emeritus Professor of English at Kean University in New Jersey and former distinguished research professor at Sam Houston State University in Texas. He's authored 7 books, most recently, A Literary Life of Sutton E. Griggs, published by Oxford University Press, as well as the award-winning Edgar Allan Poe and his 19th century American counterparts, and Race, Gender, and Empire in American Detective Fiction. He's also edited 7 books, including Animals in the American Classics, How Natural History Inspired Great Fiction. Because of the success of that interdisciplinary collection, he's working now on the next one called Animals in American Poetry, How Natural History Inspired Great Verse. Dr. Gruesser has also served as president of 2 major American author societies, one the Pauline Elizabeth Hopkins Society, and the other the Poe Studies Association. Tonight, Dr. Gruesser will address, among other things, what it was like for a Southern black novelist to be writing and trying to reach both a black and white audience at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century in the United States. His lecture tonight focuses on Sutton E. Griggs' Nashville years, his Orion Publishing House, and the role of Tennessee in his novel. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Gruesser.
Well, thank you all for coming today. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about Griggs in Nashville. I've actually been working on Sutton Griggs since the 1990s, but I didn't start investigating his life until about 2014, and I made several trips to Nashville and also to Tennessee. Also to Memphis, where he spent a considerable amount of time doing research on him. So Philip's already talked about the literary biography, and I think there'll be time for me to read a little piece of it a little bit later in the presentation. So let me tell you a little bit about Sutton E. Griggs. He was an orator, he was an educator, he was a novelist, he was a publisher, he was a philosopher, and he was a public intellectual. His relationship with Nashville, it's very likely that he first came here in 1897. I'll talk about what he came here for. He then lived in the city from 1899 until 1913, and after he left Nashville for Memphis, he returned to the city quite often. So he came in 1897 for the Tennessee Centennial. And if you've ever been to Centennial Park, you no doubt have seen the Parthenon. This is it's a replica of the Parthenon in Greece. And it's the only building that survives from the Centennial. But there were many other temporary buildings that were built for that event. In fact, this is the cover of Sutton Griggs' fourth novel, The Hindered Hand. And you can see here a white hand hindering a black hand that is reaching up to God. And there are the angels there in the heavens. And it's a reference to the epigraph of the novel, which is Psalm 68:31. But it's very likely that that building there, beyond the reflecting pool, is and also reflected in the pool, is based on one of the buildings at the Centennial, the Knights of Pythias building. So Griggs' father was a Baptist minister in Texas, and he encouraged black Texans to make the journey to Nashville for the Centennial, which ran throughout the summer, because of the Negro building that was part of it, which celebrated African American achievements. Griggs' younger brother, who was also named Alan, also attended school in Nashville, and I'll talk about that in just a second. He attended Roger Williams University, which was located where Peabody College of Vanderbilt is located today. It was a very large black Baptist college, but there were two suspicious fires in 1905, and this building burned down as a result of that. Roger Williams University was resurrected 3 years later, but not in the same location. Griggs was raised in Texas. He got a degree at Bishop College in Marshall, Texas in 1890. He then moved to Virginia, to Richmond. He got a divinity degree at Richmond Theological Seminary in 1894. He remained in Virginia as a journalist and as a pastor. But in 1898, 1899, he made an unprecedented transition to Southern black novelists. And there really were no Southern black novelists. His first novel, Imperium and Imperio, was published through a vanity press. He didn't know where to publish it, so and as a result, it was an expensive proposition on it. He definitely did not make money on the book. But he sets part of the novel at an institution called Stowe College, which is very likely based on Roger Williams University. When Griggs came to Nashville in 1899, he worked as an editor for the National Baptist Publishing Board. This was one of the most successful black businesses in the United States. It was the publishing arm of the National Baptist Convention, which was based in Nashville. And it was right downtown, close to what is known as Printers Row today. It still exists, the National Baptist Publishing Board. It's now called the R.H. Boyd Company. And it's not based downtown anymore. It's based outside of the city, but still within the city limits. And I want to show you, and I hope this is going to work, I want to show you a couple of links. The National African American Museum in Washington, D.C. has a display on the National Baptist Publishing Board. So there's Richard Henry Boyd on the left. His oldest son, Henry Boyd, who took over for him, is all the way on the right. And I just want to scroll down and show you a couple of really powerful images here of what Boyd was involved in. Along the way, I'll just point out this was the time clock that was used for employees. Going down a little bit further, just want to show you some of these images. So in addition to printing things like missals, all sorts of publications for church services, the National Baptist Publishing Board made pulpit furniture, pretty much anything that was needed in a church available. Boyd was also one of the founders of the Penny Savings Bank in Nashville, one of the first financial institutions open to African Americans. And the National Baptist Publishing Board was the only place in the country where black dolls could be purchased. All the other dolls, of course, had white faces. In 1906, when public transportation in Nashville was segregated, Griggs and Boyd and several other people decried this, and Boyd led the way in purchasing a number of automobiles. That's actually Boyd driving this one here, and it was a boycott. The thing was, well, if we can use our own automobiles, then we won't have to use the public transportation system. Unfortunately, these automobiles weren't able to get up some of the hills in Nashville. So as a result, that part of the boycott fell through. Boyd also started a daily newspaper in Nashville in 1906, the Nashville Globe. Griggs worked as an editor for the National Baptist Publishing Board. He was on the board of the National Baptist Publishing Board, and the Globe supported, announced Griggs' lectures and sermons and his publications. But by 1912, Griggs and Boyd had a falling out. Griggs used the National Baptist Publishing Board to print his works, and Griggs owed Boyd and the National Publishing Board a lot of money. And because Griggs said, no, it's the National Baptist Convention that should pay for the cost of my publications, the Globe started to attack Griggs, and the relationship became even more heated after that. So let me go back to the PowerPoint, but then from there go to another link, and I just want to show you a 2-minute video about the R.H. Boyd Company today. LaDonna Boyd talks about her company, talks about her great-grandfather, and it really gives, and there's some great images in this as well. I just want to point out before I start this, that's the Woodland Street Bridge in Nashville, which I'll be talking about later on. But I had the opportunity to meet LaDonna Boyd. I did some research at the R.H. Boyd Company. So let's take a look at this.
Hello, I'm LaDonna Boyd, 5th generation president CEO of R.H. Boyd Publishing Corporation. This company was founded in 1896 by my great-great-grandfather, Dr. Richard Henry Boyd, and since then we've carried on the legacy of telling the narrative of the African American experience. Our family of companies focuses on producing and providing the highest quality of Christian, inspirational, historic, educational, and cultural literature, merchandise, and services. We want to focus on telling the narrative of the African American experience, and we want to challenge our listeners and our readers to make sure that they're asking the hard questions. So what is their relationship with faith? How do they take their faith into their daily lives? What does that look like in your career, in your education, in your cultural surroundings, in your relationship with your family and friends? And what can R.H. Boyd do to, again, further the issues that impact our community? My great-great-grandfather, Richard Henry Boyd, was born enslaved in Mississippi in 1843. After he gained his freedom, he was able to learn how to read and write, and he was able to pursue his dream of giving people the opportunity to have their own voices heard. He founded our company to give a voice to the voiceless. He wanted to provide newly freed African Americans with the opportunity to have their own voices heard and to tell their own stories in the context of faith. And that's something that we continue to pursue to this day. Through our family of companies, we provide curriculum titles for all ages, music resources including our best-selling hymnal, author services through RH Boyd Publishing Corporation as well as Torchbearer Press. We also provide commercial printing opportunities, and our Vision Conference is a leading event that focuses on Christian education, civic engagement, scholarship competitions, women's ministry, and a lineup of internationally known speakers and entertainers. More than 100 years later, we still take great pride in being storytellers. We want to encourage our community to be modern-day Griggs and find value in their own stories. We also want to encourage conversations as well as having clear and strategic vision by providing useful resources.
So let me continue with the presentation. Within a year of arriving in Nashville, Griggs became the pastor of the East Nashville First Baptist Church, which was a very large congregation. It is now located on Main Street in East Nashville. That's what the church looks like today. But the organ, which was in the original church, and I hope I'm going to have time later to show you where that was on a map of Nashville. The organ, Old Smoky, is still in the current church. Also, within a year of arriving in Nashville, Griggs was chosen to give the address at the annual Black Labor Day festivities, and it took place at Watkins Park. And I think you can probably read the last sentence here. It says that Watkins Park was a park for Black Nashvillians from 1936 until the 1960s, when the park system was desegregated. Well, all the way back in 1900, the park system was desegregated. The white festivities for Labor Day were at one park, the black festivities were in Watkins Park. Across the street from Watkins Park, it was Pearl High School, which was the African American high school. Griggs gave speeches there. It's now the Martin Luther King Charter School. Griggs founded his own publishing company, the Orion Publishing Company, in 1901. And it was in large part because of the difficulties he had using that vanity press for his first novel, Imperium and Imperial. But through Orion, he published Overshadowed in 1901, Unfettered in 1902, 3 different printings of The Hindered Hand or The Reign of the Repressionist in 1905 and 1906, and his final novel, Pointing the Way, in 1908. He also published pamphlets. This is a fascinating one that he used to promote that 1902 novel, Unfettered. It has 2 parts. I actually used The Man on the Firing Line as the subtitle for my literary biography of Griggs. But that really is testimonials about Griggs as a writer and as a person and of his forthcoming novel. The really fascinating part of it is the New Plan of Battle, because that's where Griggs expresses his deep faith that literature has the power to improve race relations in the United States. It's something that he believed in, at least until Orion closed its doors in 1912. In that novel, and this is what the original cover of that 1902 novel, Unfettered, looked like. In that novel, there's a major scene that is set in an auditorium. It's a political gathering. The male co-protagonist is the target of an assassination plot. The female co-protagonist is doing everything she can to try and save his life. He is grievously wounded, but he does not die in the attack. And it's pretty clear that Sinclair Hall, as it's referred to in the novel, is based on the very famous Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, which of course still exists today. Griggs gave the commencement address at Fisk University, which is quite close to Watkins Park. Again, I hope to show you this on a map. He also talked at Fisk on other occasions. He gave that commencement address in Memorial Chapel, which is on the right there. If you've never been to Fisk, if you've never been in Memorial Chapel, I would really encourage you to go there. It's a beautiful building, particularly if you can get up in the choir loft and look down on the altar and the seating area. This is actually an image from MTSU. It's of Jubilee Hall on Fisk campus. And of course, the Jubilee Singers were world famous for their performances. In 1903, the National Negro Business League held its annual meeting at the Texas State Capitol. Booker T. Washington was the de facto leader of the organization, and he was the major speaker, but many many black Nashvillians spoke, including Griggs, who gave the minister's welcome address to the delegates. But another connection between Griggs and the state capitol is that in The Hindered Hand, his fourth novel, one of the male co-protagonists plans to lead an armed force of 500 black men to take over the state capitol and to take over a nearby federal building and to then demand that African Americans be given their civil rights. The Hindered Hand also begins on a train, on segregated train cars. It's kind of the way that Griggs introduces some of the major characters in the novel to the story. And the train arrives in a station in Almaville, and Almaville is clearly based on Nashville, so that would be Union Station. Union Station still exists, but it's now a luxury hotel. And several other scenes in that novel take place on train cars. And here's one. You can clearly tell that it's set on a train. The Hindered Hand was the only one of Griggs' novels which featured illustrations. Three key scenes in The Hindered Hand take place on the Woodland Street Bridge. You remember right at the beginning of the video that I showed you? That's what the Woodland Street Bridge looks like today. That's the new version of it. The old version looked like this and had this very distinctive triangular pattern. So the first scene in the novel that takes place on the bridge, young Henry Crum has been condemned by the criminal justice system to serve 10 months on the brutal county farm. And he's heard such horror stories about it that he jumps out of a window and tries to run away. Well, seemingly everybody, or at least all of the white people in Almaville, try and run him down. In fact, it gets to the point where there are at least 1,000 people on the bridge based on the Woodland Street Bridge. Henry gets off the bridge, goes into the water, somebody on the bridge takes out a pistol and shoots him, and he either dies from the gunshot wound or he drowns as a result of that. A second scene it features a lynching that takes place, and the victim is hanged from the Woodland Street Bridge. And in one of the most dramatic scenes in the novel, the two co-protagonists wrestle at 1 a.m. One of them is Earl Bluefield, that person I mentioned before, who is planning to lead that armed force against the state capitol. The other is Ensel Elwood, who is a minister who is trying to do everything he can to prevent him. Bluefield has a pistol with him. As they tussle, the pistol goes off. Bluefield is injured, but not fatally, but it puts an end to his planned raid on the state capitol. In 1908, Griggs published a letter to the editor of the Nashville American about a lynching that took place right here in Murfreesboro. This is the top part of an article which appeared in a Tennessee newspaper. Negro rapist, victim of mob, hung from a small tree not far from the limits of Murfreesboro, had made an attempt at assault. About 75 persons participated in the lynching bee. Now, I don't know about you, I've heard of sewing bees, I've heard of spelling bees, I've never heard of a lynching bee. Up until I read that, I thought a bee was a relatively benign event, but clearly this was not. It was reported across the country. This is the article that appeared in the San Francisco Call. The victim of the lynching was George Johnson. He was accused of assaulting a white woman, Miss Morris. He was arrested. Miss Morris supposedly identified him. He also supposedly confessed. The sheriff had the jail well defended, but he found out that there was a plot to dynamite the jail, so he tried to whisk Johnson away on a buggy, take him to Nashville, but the mob overturned the buggy and Johnson was hanged. And I would just like to read some passages from that letter to the editor that Griggs published. It's really his strongest statement about lynching. So Griggs chose not to emphasize lynching's crushing effect on African Americans, or to assert the innocence of its victims, but rather to spell out how the horrific practice is affecting white people's morals, American ideals, and the future of the United States and other nations, topics he would expound on in some of his later writings. Referring to a lynching 3 days earlier in nearby Murfreesboro, he claims that the mob murdered 2 men, the second of which, he says, was Law. He was the favored child of the imperious Anglo-Saxon race, and it has been through him that her great civilization has been wrought, and her every hope for the future was bound up in him. All citizens loving their homes, their country, and their God, laboring to move the world toward the good, were depending upon that virile son of the Anglo-Saxon race, Law, to preserve and transmit all they achieved. And then he poses a series of questions. Is it not too great a price for the Anglo-Saxon to lynch its noblest child in order to wreak vengeance upon a depraved son of Africa? Would it not have been far better to have spared the Anglo-Saxon offspring and to have given this colored man into his stern hands rather than to have lynched him along with the accused? If there is to be this continuous lynching of the law, will he not eventually die? Griggs concludes by making clear the consequences of unchecked mob violence. Quote, when the reverence for law finally dies out of the bosoms of men, and discontent shall feel free to lay its hands on whatever he may covet regardless of law, the world will indeed have fallen on evil times. Another link between Griggs and Nashville is American Baptist Theological Seminary, which he, along with his father, was instrumental in founding. And Griggs served as the first president of ABT. The first building on campus was actually Griggs Hall, named after Griggs and his father, and that's what it looks like today. So it was founded in the early 1920s, and Griggs served as the first president from 1925 to 1926. But it played a key role in the run-up to the civil rights movement, and some very famous people in the civil rights movement, including Congressman John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, both of whom are pictured here, Bernard Lafayette, and James Bevel, attended ABT. They lived in Griggs Hall, they took classes in Griggs Hall, they ate in the cafeteria, which was all based in Griggs Hall. And so what I want to do is to go to the website that I have, which is devoted to Sutton Griggs, because one of the sections of it is devoted to American Baptist College. And American Baptist Theological Seminary changed its name to American Baptist College in the 1970s. But I have several images here of American Baptist College today. So here is one side of the historical marker about Griggs Hall, and you can see the reference to Griggs' father, but also to Griggs himself, his Orion Publishing Company. 33 books are listed there, but actually he published significantly more than 33. It's closer to 50. And then the other side of the historical marker talks about the connection between Griggs Hall and figures in the civil rights movement. And this is what Griggs Hall looked like before it went through the renovation. These are pictures that I took. So I started to come to Nashville in 2014 to do some of this research. It was currently under renovation then, and in 2018 it opened up again after its reservation. Just one more thing about, well, here is on the side of the building, you've got this plaque. It mentions Griggs as one of the founders of ABT, and he's also listed as the first president of ABT. I've got another image of what Griggs Hall looks like today, and then I just want to show you one final image. This is the headquarters of the National Baptist Convention Incorporated, which is on the campus of ABT. And while I have you at my website devoted to Griggs, and it's a Google site, so if you want to access it, just type in Sutton Griggs website. If you're on Google, it should be the first thing that comes up. If for some reason you can't find it, it's one of the external links on the Sutton E. Griggs Wikipedia page. If you go to the homepage, it lists a lot of the most recent things connected with Griggs. And the most recent things that I've done are 2 trail maps. A trail map that I hope to show you about Griggs in Nashville, and the one that I showed yesterday, which is about Griggs's early years, his time in Tennessee. I actually have a photo here of the grave that I was able to find, where I believe that Sutton Griggs is buried in Nashville. This is the cover of the scholarly edition of the Hindered Hand, which I co-edited, and you can see kind of a better image of that cover that I was showing you before. Sutton Griggs' wife, later his widow, Emma, whom he married in 1897, founded a business college in Nashville originally, and then when the family moved to Memphis, it migrated with her, and she died in 1948, but Griggs Business College lasted until the 1970s, and the building still exists in Memphis. In fact, recently it was named to the National Register of Historic Places. There is a documentary film being made about Griggs Business College, and t-shirts are being sold in connection with it. Here's the front of the t-shirt, and here's the back of the t-shirt, and this was one of the logos of Griggs Business College. You're a key to greater values. Also on the website, there are links to all of Sutton Griggs' novels and to most of his nonfiction. There's still some that I have not been able to find, but I have most of them, so if you ever want to do some research on Griggs, this is really the go-to place because of all of those links. In addition, I have a number of images related to the Hindered Hand. Remember, that's the novel that came out in three different printings. The first didn't have a cover illustration. It didn't have any internal illustrations, and this is what the cover looked like. The next 2 editions, these are the ads, and it was the only book of his that had ads, and it's ads for his own book at the back of it. The second printing had a cover illustration and had inserted illustrations. And then the final version, and the one that was the most widely distributed, had the cover image and then illustrations which were integrated into the text. But what Griggs would do is that he, at least this is my assumption, is that he had the pages printed in ahead of time, and he had those on hand. But he would only bind a certain number of copies at a given time. Really, the only way that Griggs was able to sell his works was if he gave a lecture, or if he gave a sermon, or if he was participating in a religious meeting of some kind. He lamented the fact that there had to be some kind of personal connection between himself and someone who was going to purchase his book. He tried to market them, he tried to advertise them in African American publications, but he really got very few mail orders. But as you look at some of these images, you'll see that there were 2 different versions of the cover image. So there's one that's a rectangular one, which has Griggs' name as part of the image. But then there's another image which is a square cover image, which has Griggs' name either just his last name or his full name, Sutton E. Griggs, underneath the cover image. And again, it's because they were bound at different times. At least that is my assumption. I also have a number of images of Griggs that I can show you. Griggs is seated here in the middle of this image. Here's the younger Griggs. Here's an older Griggs. Here's a good shot of Griggs. Here's a slightly older Sutton Griggs, younger Sutton Griggs. This is the one that I showed you earlier. This is probably the most well-known or most widely distributed image of Griggs when he was a young man. The only image that I've been able to find of Griggs as an older man, and this is from a newspaper obituary, is the one on the left. My favorite image of Griggs is the one on the right. I think it looks very dramatic here. Quite appropriately, he's got some papers held in his hand. He's kind of looking far away, looking to the future perhaps. This is a really interesting image. Griggs participated in the 1906 meeting of the Niagara movement. There's W.E.B. Du Bois seated front and center. This is Griggs over here standing on the right. And this lets me know that Griggs was not a very tall man, at least compared to other people here. A fact that I wouldn't have known if I hadn't come across this particular image. One other thing I'll mention, there are interviews on the website, including one of Bernard Lafayette, who attended ABT and who followed in Griggs's footsteps as a president of ABT after receiving a degree from Harvard University. I'd like to then from here I'd like to go back to the PowerPoint and go to this map that I created, where I hope to be able to show you a lot of the places that I've talked about. And as I mentioned, this is available on, you can get a link to this and view it through the Sutton Griggs, the homepage of the Sutton Griggs website, and it's annotated. So there's information, probably the things that I've forgotten to tell you, you'll be able to find on this trail map. Let me show you various things here. So here is the Parthenon. Here is Vanderbilt College. This is I'll show you this image. This is what the Peabody College looks like today, but that's where Roger Williams University was located. Here is where the R.H. Boyd Company is today, way over here, the outskirts of Nashville. Here is where American Baptist College is located, across the Cumberland River in East Nashville. Here is Union Station. Let me blow this up a little bit and I'll be able to show you things in a little bit more detail. Here is Fisk University. Here is close by Watkins Park, which I talked about. Moving over here, here is Ryman Auditorium, close to the river. Here is the state capitol. This is the original location that I'm pointing to. I don't know if you can see where I'm pointing. That's where the National Baptist Publishing Board was. And then right, very close to it was the Woodland Street Bridge. If we move across the Cumberland River, here is where the East Nashville First Baptist Church is today. Here is the Nissan Stadium where the Titans play football. But over in this area is where the Army barracks were, the Union Army barracks from the Civil War. It was on that site where the original East Nashville First Baptist Church was located. And I don't know if you saw, it might have been hard to read, but that pamphlet, A New Plan of Battle and the Man on the Firing Line, it listed the address for the Orion Publishing Company, which was the corner of Mark and Stewart Streets. Those streets don't exist anymore, but that was the location, the original location of the church, and Griggs ran the publishing company out of the church. So that is pretty much what I